Okay, so you really want to know, huh? Fine. I'm gonna start by telling you this. And this is important, so listen up. Your entire life, this one and many others, you've been a god who uses its absolute power to make yourself powerless. Entire cultures, especially this one, have all been afraid of their weaknesses, supposedly, when in reality, they've all been afraid of their power. This goes beyond the matrix of reality. This is something much deeper than that. This is eternal. This is fully realizing your consciousness. This is infinite. This is evolution. This is our divine right.
All right, everybody, here we are once again on the Bootsy Greencast. Big changes in the works, and I'm excited to announce all that kind of stuff. But before we get going, I just want to say, first of all, thank you. Thank you for checking out this show. I really appreciate it. I don't know where it is that you're listening or watching to this show, but I truly appreciate you checking it out at all. And the reason why you're there watching it, big shout out to my friends at Content Safe, making sure that I'm being prolificized. I don't even think that's a word, but I'm practicing big words for this interview. I'm really excited because we have Adele Spraggon, which her last name rhymes with dragon, which is already the coolest guest I've ever had on the show. And she is going to talk to us about behavioral change, specifically how things work in the brain. This is her amazingly fast loading website, and it has a lot of check marks on it. And she's going to tell us exactly what she does, how she induces behavior change with folks, and really break down the science behind it. I'm personally ecstatic and really excited to get into this. Adele, thank you so much for taking the time to come and chat with me on my little old podcast. How you doing today?
Happy to be here. I'm doing great.
You've been on ABC. I mean, you got all these marks of credit. I should be nervous, but we've been joking around the whole time because you're super cool.
Thank you.
And you're
Yeah,
coming
no
from
nervous required.
oh yeah, thank God, because woo, I don't do well with nervous. I think I come across nervous even when I'm comfortable. I'm like comfortably nervous. But I don't know. We can dive into that maybe a little later in the show. Perhaps we should start by just giving you a proper introduction. If you want to maybe just share with us a little bit about what got you into the work you're doing, and yeah, let's just start there.
Sure. So I've been in the field of transformation for, oh gosh, 30 years. I hate to give away my age, but I was fascinated with how to change behaviors. I was really struggling myself with a lot of unworkable behaviors that I had. I was having panic attacks. I was quitting. I was procrastinating. And I couldn't figure out why all the mindset techniques that I'd been taught weren't working. At the same time, Owen, I was a meditation facilitator. I was a Kundalini yoga instructor. I was heavily into the spiritual side of things as well. And none of that was really working in the way that I had hoped. And so I decided after 15 years of doing all the things that I've been taught to do, that it couldn't possibly be me, that there was something off with the operating instructions, how we're being taught to use our brain. So I enrolled myself in university. I went and I got my master's, and I wanted to study it from a multidisciplinary point of view. So I went and I got humanities. And I really dove deep into this brain of ours. And sure enough, I discovered we are using the wrong operating instructions. And so I created new operating instructions and transformation. I loved your opening of your podcast because it's so true. We are so underutilizing this brain of ours, so underutilizing it, and so misunderstanding how it is designed to work. Designed, if we believe in design, or evolution, whatever. Sure. But how it works is not the way that we believe it works. And once we know how it works, wow, can you accomplish amazing things.
Wow, that is so cool. I already love the tone of this. I love the honesty. You're like, I was doing all this stuff that I was being told to do, and it was supposed to work. And it's so funny how we can sometimes, I think, become phony, even on our own spiritual practice, not acknowledging certain things that are supposed to be working, but I have to believe in it. But if I don't believe in it enough, then this is going to, and this whole thing and really becomes avoidance, right? And then we
Yes.
start turning away from this thing, pretending like we're something we're not, and those types of things. So I love your honesty. I love your approach already. And I think that's really on time. I think your message is really on time. It is for me because, I've fallen into that trap myself where it's like, well, no, I have to, put this facade almost forward that I'm this enlightened, being, which I am, but we also fart. So, this is, there's levels to this. There's parts of us that I think maybe are, depending on what you believe, evolution or a creative, design, that are very unique and special. And sometimes I think in my practice, and I think this is true for other people, is we try to suppress our personalities. And I think we're changing the wrong thing sometimes. But I think what's really cool about your work is you are highlighting that we're not changing. We're not creating change or alchemizing it in the proper manner. We have our instructions are off. So
Yeah, and some of the latest findings that are coming out of the field of neuroscience are really supporting spiritual transformation if we know how to read them, right? So that's the thing that we really need to get. So, one thing that is really cool, which your listener may really appreciate, is that they're transforming the way that we believe the hemispheres of our brain are working. So, everybody probably knows that we have a right brain and a left brain, and those two are very different things. They're doing very different things. And what used to be believed is that the left hemisphere was logical and that's language center and mathematical based, and the right hemisphere was creative and imaginative and intuitive. Debunked, forget all of that, okay? But there is a fundamental difference between the hemispheres, which is exciting when we think about the spiritual path. So the right hemisphere, its design is to always be present, always in the now. And it is forever drinking in everything that is in the immediate space. Its role is to drink it all in, but it has no way to separate and divide what is here in this space. And anybody who's interested in this, Jill Bolte Taylor's TED Talk is excellent. She's got books out there too, Stroke of Insight. She's got a new one out. But if your listener is interested in understanding about the difference between the hemispheres and how each hemisphere experiences the world, her TED Talk is excellent. So here you have this right hemisphere drinking in everything in your immediate surroundings. And then ideally it passes that information over to the left hemisphere that separates and divides and categorizes and adds language and all of that stuff so that to help you to understand what is in this environment, okay? What's so interesting about the left hemisphere is that Ian McGilchrist has determined that it creates like a virtual map. Think of the matrix, okay? We really are kind of in the matrix. It creates a virtual map in which it sort of overlays what's happened in this present moment with a subject-object perspective, okay? It separates us from the whole, from the flow. Now, ideally, in our ideal world, that information, once that separation has occurred, it is supposed to get passed to the back, to the right hemisphere for integration and for context. But because we live in a left brain dominant world, the left brain has started to go it alone. It's been going it alone for a very, very long time. And it's creating a lot of imbalance within ourselves and in the world. So our job as spiritual transformational beings is to take a step back into the right hemisphere, to get back into that integration, into that context. And once we land there, there is something beautifully peaceful about being in the flow. And I believe that's a state of enlightenment when the whole brain is working as it's designed to work. It is our spiritual enlightened state.
Wow. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So You're saying the right hemisphere of the brain, or this is what I'm hearing, and I think you're doing a good job of, not using a bunch of big words. Thank you for that. But our right brain is basically absorbing everything that's going on in the environment, bringing the information in. The left brain categorizing it, and then it, for the most part, lives there. What is supposed to happen is the right brain brings it all in, left brain categorizes it back to the right brain. Correct?
That's right. That's right. The left brain is largely just a messenger for the right, or should be. Anybody's interested in that topic, Ian McGilchrist, The Master and His Emissary, excellent book. That's its role. It's supposed to just be a messenger, but that, as he calls it, that emissary has usurped the king and thinks that it's the god now, and is trying to do it without the master, which is the right hemisphere. And our job is to recreate that balance between the two hemispheres.
Wow, I love that. So let's talk practically about, and this
Sure.
makes a lot of sense even with, I'll yank it off the wall. Like this old, a hermetic, the Kabbalistic tree of life, and the left hemisphere of the brain and the right hemisphere of the brain. I was like a little bit nervous when you were like, we're looking at these all wrong. And I'm like, oh no, have I been doing everything backwards? But I think that still the sort of masculine, feminine polarity still kind of seems to be present in that model. But it's really interesting to think about the hemispheres in that way. And it makes sense to me right off the rip. But let's talk about, if you don't mind, some ways that we can go from that left brain and integrate back into that right brain, or whatever that secondary process is.
Sure. So I teach a process called repatterning, and basically the easiest way to think about this, and again, I'm not a neuroscientist, so nobody take this as, Adele said science-based, no. Okay, but it does work. It works in practicality, and that's all that matters. Okay, yep. So it's to have a philosophy that allows you to make something work, that's even better than a philosophy, which is true. So let's go there. So here we have this left brain, and we can think of the left brain as creating patterns, okay? Patterns which allow us to see things, hear things, understand things, okay? But those patterns, those are created when you're little, and they were created in your past for a different situation. So anytime a person enters into a situation, our brain isn't born with patterns, we have to create them. Anytime a person passes through a situation in their life, the brain takes that particular action that it took at the time and stores it away for future use, okay? Now, you encounter a similar situation. The brain's fastest route to action is that existing pattern. It is not to access the right hemisphere and what's actually going on now. It's much quicker if it can overlay what was happening in the past over what is happening in the present. Everybody following? Sure. Okay, great. And then you take action based on that past behavior. Why do you think that sometimes your partner is just like your mother, right? It is because the brain is constantly just overlaying what occurred in the past when the pattern got created with what's here now. Wow. And it takes that action repeatedly. And that's why we manage to take the same action over and over and over again, even though we know it's a mistake, even though we know that we're going to suffer by taking that action. The brain doesn't care. All it cares about is your survival. And the fastest route to action is that existing pattern. So our job is to remove that pattern. Now what happens? Well, because that pattern was created in the past, we could say, just for simplicity's sake, that it is a left brain pattern. Again, just simplicity. Removing that old pattern from the past forces the brain to then tap to the right to access what's actually going on here now in this moment in order to know what action to take. Awesome. We're now much closer aligned with the present moment than we were when we were using a past-based pattern. So now the brain has to tap to the right. It informs us of what's going on here now. But still, we have to remember through the left hemisphere, because it's the left hemisphere that has language. And so we are at least aligned with this present moment. What is enlightenment, right? I mean, anybody who's on the spiritual path knows that the path to enlightenment is by accessing the now. It's by living here now. But that's extremely difficult to do when we're living in past-based patterns that are constantly overriding the now. Okay? So the brain is designed to actually want to repattern itself, but nobody has taught it how yet, because we've lived in this left brain dominant world. As soon as we know how, the brain does it naturally, easily, and then we are just naturally in this space called now, and in what I call an enlightened state.
Wow. It just clicks just like that. That is amazing. Yeah, you just shine new light on the Oedipus complex, you know? Like there's a lot of, you just
Yeah.
ruined an entire industry, you know?
That's right. That's right. Well, we have such a flawed perspective of what our subconscious is doing, right? I mean, there is no part of your brain that wants to sabotage you. There is no part of you that doesn't want anything but your best interest, right? But we have all of these myths that come from our left brain world that says the subconscious is evil in some cases, right? Demonic in some cases, wants to sabotage you in other cases. No. We just have, there are patterns that work, which means that they were created in the past, but they continue to take optimal actions. There are patterns that don't work, which means that they are obsolete, and that action that you're taking is just not aligned with the current moment. Wow. And then there are optimal patterns which are created now for now. And that is the state that we ideally want to go get to.
All right, let's talk about that.
All right. Okay.
I'm already dancing over here.
So I like to say, walk through any door as a vehicle into the unknown, and allow yourself to arise into that present moment, right? Depending on what is needed for that situation. So that is how I believe our brain is designed to be. We're not identities. Now, some people have heard that from Buddha, right? You're not a self, you're a no self. But what does that mean exactly? Well, if we can think of the brain, okay, Owen, here's the easiest way to think of yourself. You are a box of patterns, okay? That box of patterns primarily is created out of past-based situations, okay? Every pattern that arises, and you'll be able to know this for yourself. Notice how you're different here now on this podcast as you are when you're sitting in front of the TV, for example, right, watching TV. Notice how you're a different person when you're in a bar or out with your friends. We're constantly shifting identities all the time. What does that mean? It just means that we're running different patterns. So we're very social creatures. We're very adaptable creatures. That is the beauty of our brains, is adaptability. And we're constantly adapting based on the pattern that is running, okay? If we can harness that power, then we get to step through any door as a vehicle and wait until we're through in that situation to see who we need to be depending on the situation. So rather than us arriving into a space, we can arise into that space. And that's the beauty of having an adaptable brain such as ours. We don't have to know as much as we know. Our real bonus is when we can step into the unknown.
I love that. It seems intuitively correct to me too. It's like we try to store so much information away, and especially in the way we live now, right? In modern society, it's just like constant information overload. And, one of the things that I do is comedy. I do improv as well. And improvisational comedy is that way. Nobody knows what's going to happen. And you know what happens every single time, if you have good improvisers who know how to do it, is this bubble is created and it naturally pops all on its own. It just does its own thing. Nobody needs to make a joke or come up with something that they thought about earlier or any of that. If you just keep that moving with the energy itself in that environment, then ultimately the thing resolves completely on its own. So I would love to hear a little bit more about what might be involved. How do we remove these patterns, and how do we create? How were they created? Maybe even in the first place. Maybe that's a better place to start. I guess is that just through repetition, or?
No, not necessarily. Brains are creating patterns very, very quickly. Okay, so from the moment that somebody is born, the brain's job is to pattern as fast as it can every single situation it encounters. And so when from the birth, you are building patterns, boom, 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 rapid fire. Throughout childhood, you continue to build those patterns. Adolescence, massive pattern creation time. And then we enter adulthood. And at that point, the brain kind of does something interesting. It goes, I don't need any more. I know everything. I've encountered every situation. And so I can just use all of these patterns that I have stored now from the past.
Wow.
Now, does that mean that your brain doesn't retain the capacity to create patterns? Absolutely. You enter a situation and something doesn't trigger an existing pattern, your brain very quickly has to make a correction. Okay, and it will make a correction, drop that old pattern, create a new one. And that happens spontaneously quite often. Okay, what we want to do is we want to make that systematic. We want to be able to drop that pattern when any time that we are suffering. So how do we know when we're running an obsolete pattern? How we know is two ways. You set a goal and you're not taking steps to get to that goal, or you're suffering. There's conflict internally, externally. You feel bad. You have fears. You have doubts. My panic attacks. Those were all caused from an obsolete pattern that I had stored in the past that was continuing to run now. What I needed to do is remove the pattern in my brain. I had to stop trying to deal with the panic attack. So what was I doing before? I was meditating. I was doing yoga. I was doing therapy. I was doing everything I could possibly think of to try to deal with the behavior. No. Once I understood, I got to remove this pattern. Now I got rid of those panic attacks in days, like forget about weeks and years. It was like that. You literally step out of one identity into another identity, one identity in which I was panicked into another identity in which I just wasn't. And I haven't had a panic attack in over a decade now since I repatterned that. So it's not like it comes back. Once you remove a pattern, it's gone. The easiest way to understand that is to think of a pattern as a neural pathway in the brain. If we tease that pathway apart, it's going to snap into different channels, right? As soon as it snaps into different channels, you can't run that same pattern again. It's just not possible. It's not an action that your brain can take anymore. It's going to take a different action. That's the power of repatterning. Okay, so I gave a lot. Ask me a question, and then I'll give an example if you need one.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So let's see. I was curious about maybe removing the pattern at that point, right? Like
how do we do that, right?
Developed it, right? Exactly.
Yeah. So the easiest way to think of your brain is think of it as an iceberg. The top of the water are all of your actions, all of your behaviors, all your beliefs, everything that you do, everything that you think, everything that you believe. We're going to put up there at the top of the water. Under the water are where the patterns lie. Okay. Once we identify an action, a behavior, or belief that is not working, right? And there's no good or bad. We swim in a world of blame and shame because we are taught that we need to fix something. There's nothing broken about you. There's nothing broken about anybody, okay? There are simply patterns that don't work. So once we identify a pattern that doesn't work, then the next job is to identify that pattern. A pattern is an intertwined physical sensation, emotion, and thought. Three aspects of our being come together. They result in a particular action. So we identify, what are you feeling? Where are you feeling that in the body? What's the one thought that's going through your mind at this moment? Okay, good. That's a pattern that is arising here now. Now you've got to flip the switch. So I'm about to say something. All right. When you look at me, point at me for a minute, Owen. Where am I? Okay. That's actually not where I am, because this brain of ours is locked inside this bony skull. It's inside a dark and silent room, no access to the outside world. So what happens is, from the moment you met me, your brain had to create a pattern for me. Does that make sense? So inside your brain, you now have a pattern for Adele. And it's actually that pattern that you're interacting with. It's not me. So when I say point at me, ideally where we need to be pointing at when we're looking at somebody else is our own head, because this is where everything is arising. And if we can remember that, then we have tremendous power. You talked in the beginning about the power of the human being. The power lies in owning that everything that we are encountering in this world is actually arising within our brain.
Mm.
And if we can remember that, now we can remove it if it's not working, right? So that's step 2. We got to own it as a pattern and not as occurring in the world. All right, awesome. Now you got your power back. Good place to be. Now we actually have to deconstruct that pattern. We have to tease it apart. We've got to cut it back into just a physical sensation, just an emotion, just a thought. Your listener is going to love this. The process, how we do that, is through a process of surrender. We can't know anything. That's the thing. That's the problem in today's world. We know way too much. And we believe in what that pattern is telling us. And so that state of surrender that all religion has been telling us to embrace since the beginning of time is actually the only way to create a brand new pattern. We have to let go into a state of the unknown. Now, what is the one thing that human beings fear more than anything else on the planet?
The unknown?
Yes. Right? It's the one place that our brain does not want to go, because that would require that you are, for a fraction of a second, and believe me, it's just a fraction of a second, without the ability to take action. And so it resists that. So that's what makes it a little tricky, but the process that I use makes it very, very simple to actually do it. And then lastly, our brain is already doing this anyway. It's already creating a new pattern. If we go back to that neural pathway, it's already snapped into a new channel before you have to do anything. So you don't have to know what the answer is. And that's how you arise into the space when as optimal as the space needs you to be.
So, okay, super cool. So if I'm hearing you right, that would give us the ability to basically sort of shift, right? Like our identity or pattern, right? Into whatever the situation calls for, right? Which would be, to go biblical, all things to all people, or
Yep.
what have you.
Yep. We are shapeshifters. That is the way our brain is designed. We are not designed to be an authentic being, this thing that walks around. That's how the left brain sees us. We are designed to be as fluid as the moment is. Our brain is designed to be as adaptable as the moment is. Here's something else that your listener may or may not know. The right hemisphere does not distinguish between self and other. In the right hemisphere, it is all one, right? There are no boundaries. Jill Bolte Taylor brilliantly, she had a stroke in her left hemisphere. She's a neuroscientist. She had a stroke in her left hemisphere. Her left hemisphere shut down. And she experienced what many meditators will experience, that boundless connection to all that is. And it, as she describes it, and as every meditator knows, it's a state of pure bliss, but you can't take action in it, right? And so here she was in this state of pure, just euphoria, but unable to actually do anything in that state. But it's important to know that our right hemisphere is connected to all. And so when we tap to the right to create a new pattern, it doesn't distinguish between you and other. And so it naturally takes care of both of us. The optimal pattern that arises, okay, I might be losing you, so tell me if you have any questions, but the optimal pattern that arises in me is going to take care of you and me if you're going to be affected by that action.
Okay. So it's I think so. It is somehow is somehow calculating consequences, not just for myself, but also for other people subconsciously without any effort. Is that correct?
Yeah, and if it's not as woo-woo, or it's not difficult to comprehend if we understand something. And everybody, this will make sense to everybody, I think. Even though consciously I'm not registering every flicker on your face, okay, every expression, my subconscious is drinking all of that in, all right? even though consciously you may be saying something and talking about your needs, your desires, my conscious mind probably is just bypassing all of that because it's not about me, so why would I care? Right? My subconscious, that's been drinking it all in, and that knows everything. All right. So what happens then when we drop the conscious pattern and arise again? Well, we have an opportunity to tap into that vast warehouse that is stored in the unconscious. And from there, yes, you will be taken care of because the subconscious already knows really on a deep level what we both need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good. Wow. So, no, this is super fascinating. And I'm just kind of thinking of the implications. I can't help it. But, talking about those things that we want to change about ourselves, maybe that we feel like we can't. Do you maybe have any examples of that?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about that, because there are certain things that I personally struggle with. It's like, man, I really wish I could change that. But even through all the self-development or personal development or self-help or whatever, I've still yet to be able to conquer some demons that, frankly, could be, I feel like even some people might even be in bondage at this point, right? Like there are things that for some reason it's so frustrating. It's like I could change X, Y, and Z, but for some reason these other things I've had a hard time with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've worked with thousands of people around the globe, and regardless of what they face, you can repattern it. So I've worked with couples who've been on the verge of divorce. They just hate each other. They repattern their own patterns. They're like newlyweds again within 8 weeks. Okay. I've worked with people who have addictions. I had an addiction to red wine. You repattern it, you just step out of one identity into another. There's just no addiction left. Now that does take some time because there's some deep patterns in there, right. But absolutely it's possible. Anything, procrastination, money troubles, it's remarkable what you can repattern. Our brains are adaptability. That is all they are. And here's something that every listener needs to know. If somebody asks you, why did you do that? Here's your answer. Because my pattern made me. That's it. Okay? Now, that doesn't let you off the hook, because once you know how to repattern it, now you can go away and do something about that. But at least you don't have to worry about blaming yourself or feeling ashamed about anything that you do, because all action is originating in that pattern, which is stored in the unconscious regions of the brain. And what are you supposed to do when you're already in movement towards the cookie jar before you think to yourself, I want a cookie?
Yep.
Like, it's just crazy that we think that we can consciously control our actions. We can't. There is no such thing as free will. Shock, shock. Throw it all away. And instead, work in the way your brain is designed to work. Change the pattern, you change the behavior, you change the action. It's that simple.
That's awesome. Well, I have an example for you of something that I want to change about myself that I've had a hard time with. And then people might laugh, but it's so funny. And I don't really know even when this happened. My sister and I, we used to eat candy when we were kids. Everybody did, right? I'm on the road sometimes. I'm driving. I'm going here. I'm going there. I'm going to do comedy or whatever. And for whatever reason, a few months ago, I guess, I got struck with just a sudden urge to stop and buy a bunch of Blow Pops and Skittles and frosty, sugary drinks. And every once in a while, this will hit me. And I am like, it's like you said, my hand, I'm turning into the gas station before I'm even thinking about getting a big bag of candy to stuff my face with, which is humiliating. Okay. I'm like a grown man, like what is wrong with me, but it's something that I've been struggling with. So I'm curious, how would you, or how would I guess is the question, try to change that pattern? Do I sit down and start analyzing where that pattern came from, or do I just,
Great question.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay. So first of all, anybody who has a pattern, you do not have to know the originating incident in order to deal with that pattern. It was one of the things that used to drive me crazy, because I would have a problem like that, like candy eating, right? And then people would say, well, where did that start? And I'd be going, I don't know. I don't remember anything about my childhood. Why are you asking me where that started? Now I have two problems. I have my problem with candy, and now I can't find the originating incident, right?
Wow.
Okay,
Yes.
so forget it. Pattern is arising here now. All you need to look is here now. So, Owen, when you think about having candy, then there will be a physical sensation, an emotion, a thought that arises inside the thought about candy. It will be different depending on if you're running that pattern or if you're not. I like to look at it as a wrestler on a mat, right? When the wrestler is on the mat, you're running that pattern, you're already in action. You're already having to do those motions, okay? And having to do is exactly right. Your car is turning in, you're not choosing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Off the mat is when the wrestler is thinking about those moves, but not actually doing those moves, okay? So, and those will be two different experiences inside the pattern. So I always like to say, let's start off the mat. It's much harder to start when you're actually running the pattern. So when you think about eating candy, then you will notice that you have a physical sensation, an emotion, a thought. I'm going to make this up for you, Owen, because, it might be personal. So, some people would experience shame inside of the thought, I eat candy, right? They might experience like a cringy feeling physically, like as a result of that. They might want to be hiding, right? Their thought might be, oh, what's wrong with me? I'm a grown man, as you said. What's my problem? Perfect. That is the pattern that runs when you think about eating candy. And that pattern, you can own it as a pattern that's arising inside the brain. Okay. Somebody else wouldn't have a problem with it. We can tease that apart. We can deconstruct it through that surrender process. And then you won't be pulling into the candy station. The other way to deal with the pattern is when you notice the car is turning. Okay, now you're in action, so the impetus to act is already there. Much harder to deal with, an advanced technique. And if that's the case, then you'll notice there'll be some sort of craving or desire. The mouth might be watering, there might be grumbling in the stomach. It would be a different pattern. Okay, so that's how we would deal with it, is both of those situations, starting off the mat, moving onto the mat. Very soon, it depends, I don't want to say very soon because everybody's different, but majority of people, maximum 6 weeks to deconstruct an entire area of concern. And when I'm talking an entire area of concern, I mean everything. So for example, let's go back to those couples who are on the verge of divorce. They have 25 beliefs about their partner and 10 behaviors that they adopt. At the end of 6 weeks, they are crossing off every single one of those line items going, who wrote this? Adele, I don't know why I wrote this down. This is not me anymore. It's just that powerful. So, so it does take 6 weeks to learn the tool, but once you got it, wow, you ever got that tool in your pocket. It doesn't matter what you face, you can deconstruct it.
Wow, that is so cool. What an amazing way to be able to, because I know I myself, just like from that silly candy eating, I feel imprisoned.
Yeah.
Like I'm a little bit dramatic, but I do though. I feel like there's nothing I can do to stop this. Why is this happening? When did this even start? And why am I doing this now? Because a year ago I didn't do it. But I know you're exactly right, because there have been times when I wouldn't eat certain things or at certain times in my life, or these are very obvious patterns. But then as time goes on, those patterns completely change. And, I eat, late at night and I don't eat in the morning now or something like that. Like that's a very simple example, but I've noticed it throughout my life that these patterns, they do emerge automatically, really. And I'm sure if I probably had a little bit more oversight, then I could maybe guide them a little bit better and make them more healthy. So I guess that's kind of where learning the tools would kind of come into play.
I prefer to look at it as a method of subtraction. We'll just subtract what doesn't work rather than addition, which is let me correct or let me go and do something that I don't feel like doing, right? Let's just remove it.
Just delete
Why
it.
are we struggling so much, right? We're all struggling, trying to strive to get somewhere. Forget it. Just remove what doesn't work. The brain is brilliant. It will tap to the now. It will present you with an optimal pattern that will take care of you. And then you'll just naturally take that action.
Wow.
So we don't have to worry as much as we worry. Our brain is really brilliant. And the creative solutions it comes up with when we know how to work it are just shocking, like literally shocking. I don't even know how to describe it. How it's like there's open doors everywhere. That's the best way I can describe it. So right now you're in this problem, and I love the way you said you felt trapped, because that's actually the way the pattern works. It traps you in a particular identity, an identity that eats candy in this case, and you do get trapped in there. But then when you start to repattern, it's like it just naturally just disappears, and all those doors just open up, and it's like, oh no, I thought fruit over here. I didn't even see that fruit. Why am I going for candy? It does taste terrible. Here's fruit. And it's just so natural that you walk through that new door.
That's great. Yeah, and that's happened to me one time. It happened to me with smoking cigarettes, actually.
Yeah.
And I used to be a smoker for years and years and years. And then, you know, I had, I don't really know even how to explain, I try to explain how those patterns changed, and it's really difficult for me to be able to do that. I don't know. It just kind of fell off. It's kind of what it feels like.
Yes, that's exactly it. And that's how it should feel for everything. It's just natural. It just falls off. It's like, no, why would I smoke? Right? It's no fight internally.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's a deconstructed pattern right there, Owen. That's a brilliant example.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so I have one more question for you.
All right.
And I would love to know just any tools or tricks or hacks about this, because you're saying if we could understand that everything that's here is really here, how can we maybe deconstruct that a little bit or simplify it? Or are there any sort of mantras or hacks to kind of keep that awareness in mind, in understanding like, hey, everything that I'm experiencing I'm experiencing it here within, my range of 5 senses. Like it's kind of hard to think about. Like I understand the concept, but I can't visualize it, I guess, if that makes sense. It's hard for me to
Yeah, so you don't really have to. I think that would probably overcomplicate things.
Shocker.
Here's an easy way to consider this. Whenever you're doing something that doesn't work, just simply ask yourself, where do I feel that in the body? What is my one emotion that goes with that? And what is one thought? And if you can start by just identifying what those patterns are, it's amazing how much more in control you will start to feel. Now that will deconstruct the pattern. If you want to deconstruct the pattern, get my book. All the instructions are in there, and I gift my book to everybody. So, but at least it will get you focused in the right thing, because most of the time we try and solve the problem as if it lives out here. If we can just remember, oh, okay, hang on, this is a result of a pattern. So what am I feeling? Where am I feeling it? And what is one thought that is going through my mind right now? Good. You've anchored yourself in that pattern. You've, for a second, frozen that moment so that you can actually look at what's going on rather than just react inside of what's going on. Okay?
That's awesome. Yes, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm definitely going to get your book, and I'm going to read it. And I want to talk to you about potentially coming back and maybe doing, a little bit more of another show sometime. And
I would love that. I would love to. Yes, if any of your listeners want some questions answered, have them send it in, or we can do a little demonstration of the technique and get started. Absolutely.
I would love that. I think that would be really fun. And I'm going to be changing the podcast format a little bit in the future. And I want to try to just incorporate things that are really practical. I'm going to change the name of it too. And I haven't announced that yet, but I'm going to. or at least as of right now, I haven't. But I'm really excited about it, and I think it'll be a little bit more collaborative in that sense. So the right brain will be even more engaged.
Happy.
So I'm really excited about that, but I definitely will. I will read your book. I can't wait to, and to understand this further. And I'll make sure too that your links for everything are in the show notes. Now, before we wrap up, is there anything that you'd like to let the listeners know about, or how best to kind of get in touch with you or start their journey?
Yeah. So I like to spread this as far and wide as possible. So if anybody wants my book, you can have it free. All I ask is that you pay for shipping. Shipping in Canada is a bit expensive, so it's $15 into the States, but I'd love to gift it that way. You can also get 30 days of free training in my Pattern Maker Hub. So just go to adelespraggon.com. If you want to do it that way, there's 30 days of training in there. Yeah, like let's spread the word about repatterning, because this world so needs support, right? And we are instrumental in creating that support, and it's so possible.
Well,
no more suffering.
Yeah, no more suffering. Yeah,
No
let's
suffering.
end that. Yeah, 86, the suffering. No, I appreciate you so much, because you were courageous enough to say, you know what, this isn't working. Like something's wrong. And instead of, like many of us have, myself included, I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody. Like, well, I'm just gonna pretend like it's working. And for some things work, but other things they just haven't. And it's really confusing, right, to the mind, because it's like, well, this just fell off. Why won't this fall? So I think it's really important work, and I'm really, really grateful to share the time with you. So, like I said, I'll definitely be getting your book. Is it an ebook also? Can I do?
There is a Kindle edition.
Kindle. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Audiobook is coming in the future, but I haven't done it yet.
Oh, that's exciting. Hey, if you need somebody to read it for you, holler at your boy. That's how I got started.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, read it then. See if you
All right.
want to do the audio. That would be amazing.
I'd love to. Yeah, absolutely. I'd be more than happy to do that. That'd be great.
All right.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Owen.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Truly. I really, really appreciate you sharing. Everybody down there, be sure to go to the links I put in the show notes and check out Adele's work. It's vast, it's extensive. She's kind enough to share her work for free. Something that took a lot of a lot of pain, I'm sure, to begin to gather. So really an honor to have you on the show. Thank you so much. And yeah, thanks everybody.
Thank you.